Professional sports are a great way for all of us to unleash our inner competitor. And we laud athletes as the best of the best, putting enormous time and effort into their craft and showing off physiques that only some of us could ever dream of. But what happens when it's not the advancements made on the field, but instead the ones made off the field that end up counting? As technology moves forward, improvements are seen in the clothes that athletes wear, the equipment they use, and the tools leveraged for practice. Therefore, new questions are introduced every day as to the validity of these scientific gains. Is it unfair to rely on swimsuits that improve your speed or cleats that reduce the chance of injury? Or is it just the natural progression of the sport? Welcome to BS, a podcast where we take an in-depth look at different scientific and social phenomena and innovations, whilst tying them back to broader societal perspectives and why you should care. We're so happy you're here and enjoy the episode.
The feeling of pulling up to a track meet with my full little sweatsuit was so unmatched. Like, I thought I was hot shit. Like, I thought me and my team pulling up in the bus, getting out of some random school. I'm looking around like, yeah, y'all can't mess with us. Y'all can't mess with us.
I love the track uniforms. Like, everybody knows, like, if you are a college student and you run track, like, you're hot. Like, that is honestly a part of the recruiting process.
No, that's the thing. And I mean, I only ran in middle school and high school. I was a hurdler, guys. I was a hurdler. No, real cool. LOL. Even though I was like the only hurdler on the team.
No, in grade school, I wanted to be in gymnastics so bad. But like gymnastics is just such an expensive sport because of like the equipment and the leotards and everything that I was never able to. So, you know, I just sit on my couch and I root for Simone Biles. I root for Jordan Childs, okay? Like,
see, my mom just needed to have been more of a Tiger mom. And then maybe I would have been Simone Biles. I hated gymnastics apparently. And she said that every time I got out of practice, I would beg to quit. And so eventually she just let me. And I'm like, that was the wrong move. Like, I could have been legendary. You should have been like, no, stick with it. And who knows, I could have been at the Paris Olympics. Like, girl.
No, she was definitely not on Project Messi. But no, like, honestly, I feel like the Olympics is the only time I have my very selective patriotism. Like, a black person hit that field with a USA t-shirt on, like, you would have thought I was George Washington. I'm so serious. Like, you would have thought I was Benjamin Franklin. Like, this is my country.
No, definitely you bleed red, white, and blue when it's time to compete against
like,
the other teams.
I could hear the bald eagle in the back, especially when it's the UK. Like,
gentlemen, rev up your engines and God bless the USA.
But it's so interesting though, being an immigrant, and I feel like I just always have like these convoluted feelings during the Olympics. Like, on one hand, I'm like, I live in the US. I've lived in the US almost all of my life. And, you know, I'm rooting for the USA. It's a fun country to root for. I feel like we got a lot of money. We got a lot of people, and no shade. That just gives us a very unfair advantage. But at the same time, I be wanting to root for every single Nigerian athlete. But just knowing the state of our country on multiple accords, whether it's how we value sports, our access to certain things, our money, I kind of already know from the jump that we just don't got it like that, and we won't necessarily be coming out on top. Like,
yeah, no, I feel you. I don't even look for my country at the Olympics. No shade or anything like that. Love y'all.
No, shout out to Togo. You never know.
And you know what? You're right. You never know. But when I see it, I'll believe it.
But yeah, like, I definitely think that like the US and other wealthy countries like hold a lot more power when it comes to who is going to end up being the best at the Olympics, because it's really not just like the work ethic and things of the athlete. Like, where we are right now with like advancements in sports, I just feel like we're at a point where like the outfits, the training, the science behind the training, the physical therapist, like all these things that are money really go into like how far we can like push the like boundaries of like just like human strength and endurance.
They're pouring millions into it.
Exactly. And it really has gotten to the point where like sports enhancements is like a consistent like discussion in these like professional meets, where it's just like what should and can be allowed, and like at what point is it no longer just like human like progression and it's like technology taking the forefront. Now, for one, like just to get into like what sports enhancements are, they can be categorized as any technology used to improve your athletic performance above what would be considered to be like typical for a human. Now, a lot of like sports enhancements discussion often revolves around PEDs because, one, I feel like they're the most like abused, and performance enhancing drugs are also just kind of very scandalous, and like I feel like that's what breaks the news the most, you know, when you find out like a random team was taking story awards when they shouldn't have been, and things of the sort. Performance enhancing substances can fall under a myriad of categories, whether it be like androgenic hormones, growth hormones, and things like that, beta blockers, protein and amino acid supplements, even vitamins and minerals if it's in the correct situation. But today we're not going to necessarily focus on PEDs and other types of like sports enhancements through drugs. More specifically, we're going to be talking about technological doping or technodoping by way of athletic wear. And this is where it really comes in with like the science and the money of it all when seeing different countries at the Olympics. Because athletic enhancements, it's a very broad term. And in terms of like technological doping, it can be as simple as just like basketball shoes, you know, like usually basketball shoes have a high top because like that aids with ankle stability, or even like chalk, like the chalk that gymnasts use is an enhancement above like, again, just like a natural human body so they can get a better grip on the bars. And it really just comes to a point about like, okay, what can we and what should we allow? And just for some history behind like sports enhancements in athletic wear, I just feel like sports has been around so long that the enhancements have also been around for so long. Like for fencing, like they have seen fencing masks as early as like 1200 BC to like guard people's face, or even like dumbbells can be traced to as early as like 5th century BC. So we were always making, you know, little equipment.
They need to transport me back there. I feel like the average person nowadays would be considered a god back then. Like my little strength, I could barely reach the cereal box, but if they put me in like 50, I feel like they'd be like, wow, like, oh my gosh, she's so strong.
Opposite. Like I feel like we are fragile. Like I don't remember the last time I did something physically hard out of necessity. I have to go to the gym and like force myself to be an animal. Like
you know, that's fair. But I just feel like, okay, maybe put me in Victorian England or something like that.
Well, I'm vaccinated. Okay. So that might be all I got on them.
But that's what I'm saying. Like they're going to see me looking healthy, looking plump, having a lot of fat on my cheeks and on my body. Like, wow, this is the pinnacle of human health.
Whole time, again, I'm just vaccinated and I ate dinner that day. Like, so in the like 19th, 20th century, a lot of sports uniforms were just mostly just rooted in practicality, but they didn't necessarily have the technology in order to curate it to each sport. So mostly the athletic wear was made out of just cotton, and maybe they would have like shorter shorts and things like that for sports like tennis and cycling. It wasn't even until like the earliest 20th century where like team identity and things like that had more of an importance, and they decided to start putting emphasis in like the looks of athletic wear as well. I feel like the technological advancements for clothing material actually picked up heavily in the 21st century, as like now we have more technology to create other types of textiles, like for example polyester, nylon, spandex started to like kind of take over the position that cotton had in athletic wear, and it became popular due to like their moisture wicking abilities. They're also a lot more lightweight than the cotton, and they have compression ability, which helped with blood flow and just overall performance and comfort. Now, in terms of like where we're at in 2025 when it comes to sports enhancements, like the rules behind them are very touch and go. Like I feel like we haven't gotten to the point where we have started to regulate them as heavily as we do performance enhancing drugs. So athletic wear, the boundaries are quite arbitrary, but they're still supposed to be based on the same principle of like an unfair athletic advantage. So for example, like there was a controversy with super spikes, which were these shoes that were originally created for like long distance running, but then were adapted for sprinting and were going to be used in the Olympics. And like a lot of people were like, like that's a little bit too much. Like that's a little bit too much of an unfair advantage. But again, like no hard lines. And even though like there's like the World Anti-Doping Agency and there's also the US Anti-Doping Agency, there isn't like a particular governing body for equipment and athletic wear, and it's kind of like left up to individual governing sports bodies for events. And honestly, most of the decisions to ban a product are made retroactively. Like it kind of comes after somebody puts that shit on, goes in there, smashes the competition, like breaks a like incredible world record, and they're like, okay, now that's a little too much. Like, and we can honestly see this a lot. Like one of the most famous examples of this is like the 2008 Beijing Olympics and the US swimsuits.
Oh, for sure. That moment was a perfect example of when sports enhancements are really, really in a gray area, and there's a lot of different sides. I also think that there's a lot of different stakeholders too, and that ends up really impacting like, okay, who has the money, power, and influence in the room to actually be able to enact or take out certain legislation on sports enhancements. So for those of you who don't know, we'll go into some history and also some of the scientifics of it. But basically, everybody knows about Speedo, okay? We all know about seeing an old man in Speedo at the beach and thinking, wow, I really wish I didn't have to see that.
Speedo is like Kleenex at this point, where it's like any old man wearing some panties and like he's wearing a Speedo. Like.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And it's actually an Australian-British swimwear company, and they have been making suits for competitive swimming for a very, very long time, dating all the way back to 1927, when they actually released the Racerback, which for its time was considered quite risque, but what wasn't considered risque in the 1927s? Like, come on now. And in 2000, at the Sydney Olympics, they released something called the Fast Skin, and they said it was based off of tiny tooth-like structures called denticles that cover sharks, and they help to create low-pressure zones that pull the sharks forward. However, there was a paper released from Harvard in 2012 that was kind of like the artificial shark skin doesn't really do anything for reducing drag. And drag is just the invisible water forces that pull a swimmer, basically. So it kind of slows them down. Think of drag like you're walking outside and the wind is pulling against you and kind of pushing you back. Drag is that force, but in the water. But yeah, they released the Fast Skin. And at the time, people thought that it was actually doing something to decrease drag, so that was very, very popular. Then in 2004 at the Athens Olympics, they released like a second version of the Fast Skin FS2, which was made with spandex, but it was coated with Teflon, and that was to help the suit shed water as the swimmers were going. However, the suits were actually creating drag rather than reducing it the way that Speedo claimed it would. So they knew that they really had to get in the lab and come up with something better for the 2008 Beijing
they knew they
Olympics.
had to redeem themselves and like their company and like make sure them shareholders are happy. Like,
so you know who they decided to get into the lab? NASA. And you know what a choice. And obviously at the time it was kind of a decision that people raised their eyebrows at. They were kind of like, why are you guys collaborating with an aeronautical agency? But it was actually very, very smart.
I definitely see the vision. Like, you're trying to do something that humans should not be doing, like swimming super fast. Like, You know who's great at making humans be in positions they should not be in, like NASA? Like when it comes to the physics behind it, like they may have ate. Like
no, so they were like, we need to take this to the next level. So they found that coating swimsuits in polyurethane helped to create a more hydrodynamic surface. So they had the material, but they needed to find a way to put it together. So when they started collaborating with NASA, they ended up doing something to help sew the swimsuit together in a better fashion called sonic welding. So rather than creating seams in the swimsuit that would end up leading to drags because of the pockets, they instead used sonic welding, which basically joined the different pieces of fabric as if they were sheet metal, which helped to lead to like a completely smooth swimsuit that wouldn't lead to any drag pockets. And also, polyurethane helps to reduce drag drastically, but it also creates rigidity, so that made the suits a lot more fragile and easy to tear. So they realized that they couldn't use 100% polyurethane, but some sort of mixture. That's what led to them creating the laser racer, and that was for the 2008 Olympics. And a lot of swimsuits actually used it in like the pre-qualifying like things, and they were doing really, really, really good, which ended up like really boosting sales of the suit. And so everybody was like, low-key, I have to buy this suit and bring it with me to the 2008 Olympics. What ended up happening was the technology was trapping tiny air pockets between the skin of the swimmer and the suit itself, which almost was allowing them to float, like they were wearing a very thin life jacket. And when you're reducing skin friction, that means that you're reducing the cross-sectional area of the swimmer, which means that they're basically coming up more in the water and basically are allowed to swim faster. And what ended up happening was, and this is according to Speedo, but 98% of the swimmers who medaled at the 2008 Beijing Games wore the laser suit. And 23 of 25 world records set were won with the laser suits.
I knew them alarms started going off immediately. Like even like when I watched like the clips of like the US swimmers like celebrating, I'm just like, do y'all know y'all got 30 minutes? Like
ciao. And listen, after the Olympics, a lot of companies saw what Speedo had got going on, and they were scrambling to recreate that suit. And obviously a lot of controversy ensued because the suits were basically being composed of almost entirely pure polyurethane. And so of course they were breaking records immediately, especially at the Olympics, and then at the 2009 World Swimming Championships the following year. And the International Swimming Federation, or FINA, was kind of, they weren't sure how to feel about things. They were looking at the swimsuits, they were looking at the swimmers. It was causing a lot of controversy, a lot of media outbreaks. But finally, they made a decision at the end of 2009 to completely ban full-body polyurethane suits from international competitions. And a lot of countries ended up following suit, including the US. And they basically ended up stating that only swimsuits made out of quote unquote permeable textiles that basically could not capture the air bubbles would only be the only ones that would be legal. And they're being very specific with their wording by saying textile fabrics. As they said, when I checked the website, it has to be woven, knitted, or braided. And it's basically in order to avoid the use of people using like plastic panels or plastic materials. Mm-hmm. They also set the standard that men's suits could not extend above the waist or below the knee, and women's suits could not go past the shoulders or below the knee. And that's basically so that they wouldn't reproduce the laser design, which is basically like a full body wetsuit. Like it's basically like a compression suit. Like it's completely compressing the swimmer into it.
Into a fish.
Yes, like. Literally. Like they basically doing everything they can to make you be an aquatic being. And even though they imposed these standards retroactively, the records still do stand. None of them got struck down or struck out of the record, but it does kind of beg the question for a lot of people, kind of what inequalities are acceptable and which aren't, because obviously this was kind of a technological inequality, but a lot of people talk about socioeconomic inequalities. The records could have, or like now, even with the suits being banned, records are still being broken. So a lot of people are like, well, if the records were going to end up getting broken anyways, why did you guys ban them?
I don't know about that logic.
The thing is, there's a lot of different viewpoints, and we could talk about that later on, but definitely things to think about.
Yeah. And honestly, on the look up, because there's still like a lot of technological advancements, there's been this new ACL cleat technology. Now, honestly, the terminology ACL, like, ooh, Like, don't say that in a room of failed athletes. Like, you might see a trauma response for real. Like,
I could have gone D1 if my ACL had
like, don't say that at the cookout. Don't say that to your uncle for real. Like, so for one, like, if you were just the type of person who just keeps hearing this in the news for like big athletes, so you don't really know what's going on, like the ACL is your anterior cruciate ligament, and it is like essentially around where your knee is. And as we know, like ACL tears are very common in sports. It's one of the biggest like career ending reasons for NFL players. And it's often happening during like pivots and cuts, which is like when people are quickly stopping or quickly changing the direction that they are running in, which is again very common in the NFL. And it is requiring the athlete to just again like stop really fast with a lot of force and like twist their knee, which like again like your patella bone on your knee, your ACL is sitting right behind it while their foot stays planted. And it again oftentimes causes an ACL tear, which is very difficult to recover from. It usually takes like over a year if you ever even get like back to that level.
No, they be taken out of the game for real.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, very much career ending injury. Like I guess prayers up for Kyrie. Anyways, so a lot of like research about like ACL tears, especially in the NFL, is usually aimed to show like an issue between the grass in which they are turning on. Like I think a lot of like companies are kind of like focused on like the actual like material that they are pivoting on, which I'm not going to lie does play a role, because with real grass versus like athletic turf, ACL tears do increase significantly like on natural grass. And with studies with natural grass, it shows like basically like when the grass roots break, which is called shear failure, like that, like basically the level of force that it takes to cut really quickly or pivot really quickly causes like kind of like the grass root to break and lead to that like tear, because they're no longer as stabilized as they're supposed to be. And near every cleat that they did test in most research studies did lead to shear failure in the grass and like a divot in the ground. And then on artificial playing surfaces, even though the cleats led to that same amount of force, the grass didn't actually tear, because like turf doesn't really have a shear failure, because again, it's not natural fiber. So there's this company named Cadix, and when they saw like the research coming out, they were like, this seems like more of a problem with the cleats than it does like the ground that people are pivoting on. And their main claim is that the traction from the cleats is like significantly contributing to the amount of force, and yet companies just keep increasing the traction on cleats instead of toning it down, which is like leading to more ACL tears. So right now, like current cleat technology, like if you've ever again ran track, played soccer, played football, you could see that the cleats have spikes that are quite stiff at the bottom, and they don't necessarily account for like these sudden rotational movements and like the force that comes with them. So Cadix collaborated with Kirk McCullough, who is a sports medicine surgeon, and he works with the NFL, the MLS, the NWSL, and he specializes in foot and ankle injury, and he like just basically works as an advisor for the company. So Cadix, which was established in 2003, they basically created spikes and like studs on the cleats that have a bit more give to them to help reduce that rotational force. Like their slogan is literally cleats for your knees, like specifically like targeting, like helping reduce like ACL tears. The owner, his name is Jack Rasmussen, and he's been on like again like a lot of like podcast shows trying to like promote like, no, like guys, please, like these cleats are good. Like,
oh brother. Not the press tour to convince the
Listen.
companies to start collabing with him.
I feel like for the group of people that he's going for, again, like NFL,
No, a
like,
podcast makes sense.
you definitely got to ramp it up to tell them like, hey, like all this technology behind the athletic wear that you already have, it's not good enough. Like you need to try my thing. You need to try my thing.
I can already see the edits of just like some random man with headphones on sitting there. And then you know how they show the text on the screen and then like ominous music in the back, like current cleat technologies are doing nothing for our athletes. And it's just like a random TikTok edit that comes up on my For You page.
But to be honest, like I see his vision to be like the technology behind Cadix is so simple that like I kind of wonder why it hasn't been done already. Like obviously he doesn't go into like the nitty gritty of what's being done because like he's trying to make money off of it. But I did watch some of his interviews and basically like Cadix cleats have a very small degree of flexion in the rubber of like the studs, which allows again like for a little bit more give when it comes to that rotational force. Now a lot of people have worries when it comes to this flexion because again like cleats are supposed to be stiff for a reason. They're like, are you going to be able to still like run in a straight line the way you're supposed to? Because sometimes when brands try to like reduce that traction, then the cleats don't perform in other ways. But like I saw him kind of like move the cleats a little bit with his hands and like move the studs, and like they're still very, very rigid. It's just like a very small degree of flexion. So at the front there's like 7 studs that have that flexion, but the back has like just traditional like rigid studs that you would find on like any average cleat. And not only does it allow for like the absorption of force, but like I said, again, like his part, like he kind of Goldilocks it and found like that middle ground that still lets them remain rigid enough for them to run straight. Now, he has claimed that he has had athletes come into the lab and test it, and they said they had no problem running straight and like they had no problem doing the other things that like the traditional rigid cleats were made for. Again, he is literally the owner of this business, so I don't know why he would say otherwise, but like it definitely hasn't broke into the mainstream. Again, like this brand was created in 2023, so like it hasn't broke into the mainstream and is not necessarily being used in like commonly in these like major leagues. So I guess something to look out for. You know, I definitely see the vision though. I see the vision for him.
But the thing is, like you said, it just got invented in 2023, and we're seeing like massive gains being made on all platforms, on all sports, in terms of like, once again, the athletic wear that they're wearing, the things that they use to practice, even sometimes the medical technology that is used to kind of examine them and see like what their issues are.
Like they literally hired a surgeon who specializes in like foot and ankle surgery. I'm trying to say, and I mean that's what I just keep referencing back when I'm just like, one, America just has a lot of money, like just period, point blank. 2, we have a lot of people, and 3, we really care about sports. And like as you've seen for the development of both the 2008 swimming suits and for Cadix cleats, like these things took professionals, they took research, they took money. And like when we're thinking about again like these technological advances in athletic wear, like it's not only like are we kind of like bypassing the like limits of like human natural ability the way we discuss PEDs, but also like what pressure does that put on other people who either don't want to use these things or honestly more likely do not have access to the money to be making all these types of developments.
For sure. That's why there's a lot of different agencies and regulatory bodies that are actually put in place to oversee sports. There's international and domestic sports regulatory bodies, and they are the ones that are responsible for creating and enforcing regulations regarding athletic performance. So, of course, the main one is like the IOC, and that's the one for the International Olympics Committee. But then within each country, we have our specific sports organizations. So that's the NFL, that's the NAA, is it? You know, I just made that up, I think. NCAA, sorry, NCAA. Yes. I was so confused. I was like, no.
Something missing, yeah.
No, literally, missed the C. But NCAA, like any professional sports organization always has an overseeing body that kind of regulates the different athletes.
But that's honestly my problem. Like, even within these overseeing bodies, like the International Olympic Committee, like, you see the biases and you see the power imbalance for like the richer countries who tend to have like higher positionings in these committees. Like Avery Brundage was an American who was IOC president from 1952 to 1972. And honestly, I believe like this man's stint as IOC president is part of the reason why we even think America is such a dominant country in the Olympics till this day. America really like thrives on swimming. Like that is one of the sports that we definitely tend to do better in than other countries. And if I don't know if y'all have noticed, but there is just an wild amount of medal opportunities in men and women swimming. Like I've always kind of just brushed it off. Like, you know, a lot of different sports have a lot of like different like aspects to them. So like swimming and track just tend to have more medaling opportunities in comparison to other sports. But I do think it's very coincidental that like two sports that like the US does very, very well in have the most medaling competition, with like literally right now 48 for track and field, and literally second in terms of most medaling opportunities is like swimming with 37. But in 1952, before Avery Brundage became president, there were only 11 swimming medal opportunities, which was around 6 for men, 5 for women. And in 1972, after his stint, there were 29 swimming medal opportunities. Like it literally almost tripled. And now there's like 15 for men and 14 for women. And it's just like, I don't think that's a coincidence. I do think, again, like the power and influence of these richer countries who hold like higher stakes, even in these agencies that are supposed to be regulatory, that are supposed to be egalitarian, there's still biasy there. Like, obviously, like as time went on, there just became more medal opportunities in general in the Olympics. But again, like I do not think it's a coincidence that the like two sports with the most medal opportunities are sports that the US smashes.
For sure. Even past just the differences in Western versus non-Western countries and the ways they're kind of treated when they show up to these elite professional sporting events, there's definitely also a gender bias between men and women. For example, international sports federations and governing bodies have often imposed varying dress codes for men and women, which has caused a lot of controversy as people are kind of like, well, what is necessarily the reason that they have to compete in different uniforms? For example, certain sports such as golf have banned certain clothing that they consider too revealing, while others kind of mandate more revealing and tight-fitting clothing like beach volleyball. And these disparities can lead to differences in the comfort levels and performance of elite female athletes who kind of have to work under the often pretty sexist constraints that mostly male leadership is imposing upon them. For example, out of the 31 different international sports federations, only 3 are chaired by women. Women make up just 26.9% of the executive committees. And out of 206 national Olympic committees of the International Olympic Committee, only 24 are chaired by women. So you can really see that there is a clear inequity in terms of the voices that are being heard in the room. And a largely male leadership is kind of imposing certain regulations on women while not necessarily understanding the struggles of how these uniforms are actually going to end up impacting their performance. Even like specifically, I'm going to take a look at regulations from the Paris Olympics because those were the most recent Olympics, and look at different sports and kind of how like that gender bias has affected female athlete performance. But in gymnastics, they usually perform in leotards, which are incredibly short, show off a lot. Like usually they show like they're very V cut, so all of your legs are completely out and part of your buttocks are out,
and even some more sometimes. I'm not gonna lie. Someone who watches gymnastics,
leotards are very, very revealing. However, there are unitards which have long legs and long sleeves, and even though they're technically allowed in the Olympics regulations, they're rarely seen. I know that the German team wore full length unitards back in 2021 as kind of like not a protest, but just more like of a demonstration of they kind of want to change the rules and kind of common perceptions around gymnasts and what they're expected to wear.
No, that's true, because I'm like the social aspect has so much of an impact on it, especially for women's artistic gymnastics. Like the artistic part is very important to a lot of people, and it takes literally nothing for somebody to be like, oh, it's unprofessional, it's not traditional. It's like a very touchy subject when it comes for women's artistic gymnastics. And it really sucks because even when it's not written in rules, because of that social stigma, it really impacts like certain people's trajectory in the sport. Like there's been multiple women who have come out and said that like their body image is part of the reason why they dropped out of professional gymnastics and went to college gymnastics. And not to be shady or anything, but there's literally a college gymnast in which part of the reason why she is famous is because people like to watch her in her like kind of skimpy unitard, and not necessarily about her capacity to perform better than her peers. And because of that, she has gotten an overwhelming amount of like advertisement opportunities, millions of dollars more than her peers, because she is just cuter than them in her like leotard to many men, and like is again like just consistently outperforming her peers in terms of the amount of money that she's making. And that's not even something that we see as commonly in men's sports, where it's just like this basketball player is now just making more money by the millions than their peers because people think he's kind of cute.
Yeah, no, the incredibly skimpy and uncomfortable uniforms often disrupt the gymnastics performances. A lot of the gymnasts have said they even have to use glue to help hold their leotards in place so that they don't pay as much attention to the discomfort in their pubic area. And a lot of them are often worried about menstruation as well. For example, if a tampon string sticks out or if a stain shows up, which is why they sometimes will literally even have to coordinate what colors they wear so they don't end up wearing lighter colors that more easily bleed through. Beach handball is another sport where there were clear differences between male players and female players. For example, male players could wear shorts and sleeveless shirts, while female players had to wear a fitted tank top and tight-fitting shorts. And it actually even used to be more strict. It used to be that they had to wear bikini tops or bra-style tops and tight-fitting bikini bottoms.
Ergonomical outfit for the sport. Like, honestly, like sometimes y'all don't even try to hide it. Like, you're telling me a bikini top is the best and most like logical outfit for somebody who will be jumping?
Child. Sometimes I wish y'all would just get a magazine copy of Sports Illustrated and leave the rest
like
of
we're
us
straying
alone.
far from the light. Like honestly, I feel like at least in the 19th century they were trying to make sure it was the most like logistical technology possible. Now with our technological advances in athletic wear, like this is the best we could come up with. I don't think so.
Even track is another sport that has faced a lot of flack for this, because technically, once again, it's another sport where there aren't really formal rules that are set, but women are often seen in the classic bra and brief set. And it's really just the pressure that these female track athletes have to kind of stick to the norm, specifically in regards to showcasing their femininity. And this is an issue that honestly female athletes across all sports kind of face, where it's like the innate masculization of their bodies because they are competing in elite sports. So they feel pressure to kind of still hold uniforms that showcase like traditional feminine ideals basically. And even before the Paris Olympics last summer, there actually was controversy when the US women's bodysuit was revealed because it was cut incredibly high. And I even went to like research and look at it. It was very high. It was incredibly high on either leg. They ended up revealing like a shorts version of the bodysuit, but I remember that was something that multiple US team athletes came out and kind of spoke against, about the ways that women's like track and field kits or women's like uniforms are always just designed in a way that honestly starts to seem unreasonable and is going to detract from their performance.
Fan service at the Olympics, like just a different level of degeneracy, genuinely.
Yeah.
And honestly, what you said about like women trying to maintain some of their femininity is so correct, because in sports that are considered to be again more masculine, more aggressive, or sports that like kind of almost require you to wear more clothes, like these women are definitely chastised. Like I consistently think about that one U.S. women's rugby player. Shout out to them, they won bronze. Ilona Mahar, I think if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, and she does like a lot of advocacy for, again, just women in sports in general. And you know, I see the hate comments for her. Like I see what people have to say about somebody who is quite literally built for their profession. And it's just like the social stigma, as well as again like the laws and who's writing them, just kind of squeeze women into this very uncomfortable box. It does not allow them to have as much freedoms to perform as well as they could as like their male counterparts.
Yeah. These are, and it's very controversial and very kind of contradictory, because you guys are trying to eliminate biases in the ways that people perform in these sports, but this just ends up leading to divisions in performance between female and male athletes, which is what you guys are claiming that you are trying to eliminate, basically. And yeah, I think overall, when it comes to technodoping, a lot of interesting questions really get introduced about what we consider to be fair and what we consider to be abnormal to human performance. Because even like when I think about with the 2008 Olympics, like controversy with the swimming suits, technically Olympic pools are designed in a way to reduce wave pushback like on swimmers' bodies, and they have those little like lanes on the side that like push the waves down so they don't come onto the swimmers. And a lot of people are like, well, okay, that is a technological advancement that you guys designed the pool in a way that the swimmers could swim better, basically. And so it really just comes to like, okay, well, where are we drawing the boundaries? Where are we drawing the lines of how far this is allowed to go?
Yeah, and I also think it really just goes back to, again, like late 19th century, early 20th century, when sports and team identity in sports became like a big role in things, because like as everything is, like the Olympics are political. You know, there's a lot of patriotism and subsequently nationalism that goes into the Olympics, and even the idea that your country can afford to spend money on something that might be considered frivolous, and are smart enough to create the innovations that get them the gold medals. Like that alone makes people not necessarily root for what's fair for the athletes, but almost as if like, how far are we going to let these countries go? Like, it's become more than athletic performance for people. And even when we are literally just basking at complete and utter unfairness, it just comes to a certain point where we don't really know where to draw the line. I mean, we're having Palestinian athletes that are completely displaced competing against Americans who have been training their entire life for this. We have countries that like don't even have the GDP or population of one American state having to have medal comparisons for where they rank. Like, of course, the US and China are just whooping every other country in terms of medal rank. Like, we have so many people and just so much money. And it's like, obviously, there's just so many moving factors, and where we actually decide to draw the line can be quite tricky. But I do think that our wins, especially as Americans, as a country that cares a lot about sports and spends a lot of money on sports, like should be at least viewed within the lens of, this is not something that is just American in general, like the ability to win, the ability to succeed, the determination it takes, or even the genetic ability, because I know how some of y'all get. So like it's a lot of it really is just money, like really just money that's driving the whole operation. And regardless of how we want to regulate the advancements that come from that excess in money, like that needs to be a precursor to the way we look at these victories and accomplishments.
Yeah, there are a lot of invisible enhancements that people don't necessarily acknowledge. I think a good point is that a lot of the times these inequities are seen in the training facilities that athletes have access to, the equipment that they can buy, where they can practice, what clothes that they can even show up in. I mean, another really big issue with the laser racer wasn't just the fact that it was conferring an unfair advantage, but also the fact that it was putting pressure on athletes from lower income countries, because they were kind of like, well, now I have to compete against people who can afford to buy this new techno swimming suit that I don't have access to. And I think what, for a lot of people when it comes to techno doping, really kind of like sparks outrage is that they can see the clear inequities when usually the inequities are baked into things that happen long before they even arrive at the arena. Once again, the money, the training facilities, the access to medicine, food, coaches, medical staff, like all of these things are technically advantages that wealthier, higher income Western countries have access to. But once again, it's not something that is directly clear when you line up on the like starting line in the blocks. Like that's not something you can see. So I think a lot of people's outrage comes from, okay, now I can directly see that that suit is giving you an advantage, or I can directly see that those cleats are giving you an advantage. And that is really where it starts to become, okay, well, now I have an issue. So I think it will really take sporting agencies and regulatory bodies really looking at, okay, yes, there are some where it's like, okay, this is like a clear biological advantage that you are gaining, but maybe we also need to look into the way we structure these sports and these rules. And like, for example, F1, I love F1, guys. They started putting a cap on how much money teams could spend on creating their racing cars so that it could be more of a level playing field across all teams, because obviously the big name brands like Mercedes, Red Bull, McLaren are pouring like so much money, and smaller racing companies like Williams or something like that can't keep up. So they started having that cap, and guess what, the sport did end up becoming more equal. There did start to be less of, and obviously there's still major gaps between like the top 3 teams and then like the bottom 5 or something, but you did start to see that smaller teams started having more of an advantage coming into it. And I think that that's something that sporting agencies really need to take a look at and be like, how can we make sure that all athletes are respected, that all athletes get to put forth their best and not constantly feel like they're under the pressure of the continuous scientific gains that they're not going to be able to have access to.
Oh, for sure. That's why, like, again, like what I'll leave y'all with is look at everything with a critical eye. I'm sure we sound like a broken record saying that at the end of every episode, but I think it's like easy, especially if you live in the US, to like fall into the trap of like, oh, we're eating, we're doing so good, and we're da-da-da-da-da. But it's just like, unfortunately, everything is plagued by capitalism. And even when we are focusing on making sports quote unquote fair, which is something that has been in high contention in the US very recently, it's almost kind of funny to see people like losing their minds over the fairness of sports in the US, particularly women's sports, just knowing the way the US gets down when it's time to win a medal. So yeah, look at these victories, these accomplishments with a critical eye, like understand everything is political and possibly propagandized. And
what a wonderful but I mean, sometimes that really is the takeaway, man. But yeah, guys, always remember to remain curious, remain educated, and remain critical, and we'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.